The Shocking Arrival.
"There she is,"
said the carter with satisfaction.
"and she's all yours." "It can't be,"
said Adrian faintly.
"It can't be mine. I don't want an elephant." "Now look here,"
said the carter with some asperity.
"I have travelled all night, see, to bring this ruddy animal to you. You are Mr. A. Rookwhistle, therefore she's your animal."
Adrian began to wonder if the shocks he had already received that morning had unhinged his mind. It was bad enough to cope with an acrobat without finding himself suddenly saddled with, of all things, an elephant. Then suddenly he had an awful suspicion.
"What's its name?"
he asked hoarsely.
"Rosie,"
said the carter.
"Leastways, that's what they told me."
At the sound of her name, the elephant swayed to and fro gently and uttered a small squeak. She was shackled inside the dray by 2 chains padlocked round her front legs, and they made a musical clanking noise when she moved. She stretched out her trunk seductively towards Adrian and blew a small puff of air at him.
"Oh, God,"
thought Adrian.
"I'd much rather it was a drunken acrobat. Look here,"
he said to the carter.
"What am I going to do with her?" "That,"
said the carter with ill-concealed satisfaction,
"is your problem, mate. I was merely engaged to deliver her, and delivered her I have. So now I haven't had any breakfast. If you remove her from my van, I will be on my way." "But you can't just leave me in the street with an elephant,"
Adrian protested.
"Why not?"
inquired the carter simply.
"But I can't take her in there,"
said Adrian wildly, gesturing at Mrs. Dredge's 6-foot square front garden.
"She won't fit, for one thing, and she'll tread all the plants down." You should have thought of that before you ordered her,"
said the carter.
"But I didn't order her. She was left to me by my uncle,"
said Adrian, reflecting as he said it how very unlikely the whole thing sounded.
"He couldn't have liked you very much,"
said the carter.
"Look, do be sensible."
Adrian pleaded.
"You can't just stick an elephant down in front of me and then go off and leave me." "Now, you look here,"
said the carter in a shaking voice, his face growing purple.
"I was engaged to transport an elephant. It was foolish of me, I know, but there we are. I've been on the go all night. Every pub we passed, she nearly had the dray over. It's the worst ruddy journey I've ever had in 24 years' experience as a carter. And now all I want is to get rid of her as quickly as possible. So if you'll kindly remove her, I'll be on my way."
Even if he succeeded in getting Rosie into Mrs. Dredge's front or back garden, Adrian thought, how was he to explain the sudden appearance of an elephant? It was too much to hope that Mrs. Dredge wouldn't notice her. But something had to be done, for the carter was adamant and growing more and more purple and restive with each passing moment. Then Adrian had an idea. Pucklehammer, he thought. Pucklehammer's yard. That would be the place to take her.
"Look,"
said Adrian desperately to the carter.
"Can you take her down the road a bit? I've got a friend who's got a yard. We can put her in there."
The carter sighed deeply.
"See there,"
he said.
"I've delivered your elephant to you. I was not asked to deliver it anywhere else but here. But it's only just down the road, and it'll be worth a sovereign to you,"
said Adrian.
"Well, that's different,"
said the carter, and he slammed the doors of the dray, shutting off the sight of Rosie, who had picked up a small wisp of straw in her trunk and was daintily fanning herself with it. The carter shouted to his horses. They strained forward, and the massive dray rumbled down the road, with Adrian pacing feverishly beside it, endeavouring to persuade himself that there was nothing Mr. Pucklehammer would like better than an elephant in his yard. Mr. Pucklehammer was still sitting on the coffin, consuming yet another pint of beer.
"Hello, boy,"
he said jovially.
"Got your acrobat." "Mr. Pucklehammer,"
said Adrian in a low, controlled voice,
"you've got to help me. You're indeed the only person I can turn to in what is rapidly becoming a nightmare." "Why, what's happened, boy?" It has arrived,"
said Adrian.
"What's she like?"
inquired Mr. Pucklehammer with interest.
Rosie,"
said Adrian.
"is an elephant." "An elephant?"
said Mr. Pucklehammer and whistled.
"That's a bit of a problem for you." "You could put it that way,"
said Adrian coldly.
"An elephant,"
repeated Mr. Pucklehammer thoughtfully.
Well, that's a bit of a facer." "I'm inclined to agree with you,"
said Adrian.
"What am I to do with her, I just do not know. But all I do know is the wretched man who has brought her, not unnaturally, wants to get rid of her. She won't fit in Mrs. Dredge's garden, so I've had to bring her here. Will you let me keep her in your yard for a bit until I decide what to do?" Yes, boy, of course,"
said Mr. Pucklehammer readily.
"Plenty of room here. Never had an elephant here, come to think of it. It'll make a bit of a change." "Thank God,"
said Adrian fervently.
"I'm most grateful to you."
He went back into the road, where the carter appeared to be melting steadily into his handkerchief.
"It's all right,"
said Adrian.
"She can come in here."
The carter threw open the doors of the dray, and Rosie uttered a pleased squeal at the sight of her friends.
"Here's the keys,"
said the carter, handing them to Adrian.
"One for each padlock." "Is she tame?"
asked Adrian nervously, realizing that up until that moment he had had no experience with elephants.
"I think so,"
said the carter.
"You'll soon find out, though, won't you?" "Perhaps I ought to get it something to eat,"
said Adrian.
"To keep it occupied. What do they eat?" "Buns,"
said Mr. Pucklehammer, who was peering at Rosie with interest.
"Do be sensible,"
said Adrian irritably.
"Where am I going to find a bun at this time of the day? How about oats?"
suggested the carter.
No, it's buns they eat,"
said Mr. Pucklehammer.
"I do wish you'd stop gassing on about buns,"
said Adrian in exasperation.
"We haven't got any buns." "How about a cheese sandwich?"
said Mr. Pucklehammer.
"I'll go and get one, and we'll try."
He returned presently with a large cheese sandwich, which he handed to Adrian. Very cautiously, holding the sandwich in front of him as though it were a weapon, Adrian approached Rosie's vast grey bulk.
"Here you are then, Rosie,"
he said hoarsely.
"Nice cheese sandwich. Good girl."
Rosie stopped swaying and watched him approach with twinkling eyes. When he was within range, she stretched out her trunk and with utmost speed and delicacy removed Adrian's bowler hat and placed it on her own massive domed head. Alarmed, Adrian jumped back, dropped the sandwich, and trod heavily on the carter's foot. This did not improve the carter's already frayed temper. Picking up the sandwich, Adrian approached Rosie again.
"Here you are, Rosie,"
he said in a trembling voice.
"Nice sandwich."
Languidly, Rosie reached out her trunk again, took the sandwich from Adrian's shaking fingers and inserted it into her mouth, which looked, to Adrian's startled gaze, the size of a large barrel. Faint grinding and slushing noises indicated that the elephant did eat cheese sandwiches. Hastily, while her mouth was full, Adrian went down on his knees, undid the padlocks, and removed the shackles from Rosie's legs.
"There we are,"
he said, backing out of the dray.
"Come along then, good girl."
Rosie sighed deeply, took off the bowler hat, and fanned herself with it, but apart from this, gave no indication that she intended to vacate the dray.
"I'm normally a patient man,"
said the carter untruthfully.
"but I'd like to point out, while you're stamping all over my feet and stuffing the elephant on sandwiches, that I haven't had so much as a bite to eat this morning." "Well, I'm trying to get her out,"
said Adrian aggrievedly.
"You can't force a thing that size." "Would you care for a sandwich and a pint of beer?"
Mr. Pucklehammer asked the carter.
"That's very obliging of you,"
said the carter, brightening perceptibly.
"Very obliging indeed."
While the carter and Adrian stood there, staring at Rosie, who was now swaying to and fro, an utterly heartrending sighs, Mr. Pucklehammer went into the house and soon reappeared, carrying a sandwich with a brimming pint of beer. The carter's delight at seeing these victuals was nothing compared to Rosie's enthusiasm when she saw the tankard. She uttered a loud and prolonged trumpeting that made Adrian jump, and lumbered out of the dray into the road. Mr. Pucklehammer stood rooted to the spot, while Rosie, still trumpeting, seized the tankard in her trunk and proceeded to pour the contents into her cavernous mouth.